Press, and the editor-in-chief of CCSI. So you can ask her about these wonderful journal, this press, as well as more about the bookstore itself. After the event, I encourage you to look more into the work of Via. Yeah, without further ado, let's start it. Yeah, but one more round of applause for Via. And so here we are today. We're going to have a discussion with. I was like, chair crackling, or is it? Okay, I think it was the mic. Okay. Yes. So yeah, the air is crackling with anticipation for this conversation. Very honored, very excited. I've known Reyna for a few years now, and we've been meaning to have an event together. This is the first of many, I'm sure. Reyna Grande, as everyone here knows, is a author, a memoirist, a novelist, award-winning, won the American Book Award. She's won the Latino International Book Award. She is the winner of several other awards. She's appeared on Oprah Winfrey, and she's really just a really legend of our time. We're so very honored to have her be a part of the series and part of this conversation. But Reyna, I want to open this conversation really with talking about some of your early work, because I know that I've seen in interviews you talk about the fact that when you set out to write a book, you're looking for what is missing, and then you try to write that what you're looking for. And so you spoke about writing about the immigrant story, the immigrant narrative. You found that children were missing, and so that that was really kind of focus of Across 100 Mountains. So can you talk a little bit about that and what went into that process of writing that book, that Across 100 Mountains?
All right, well, thank you so much. This is so exciting. I was really looking forward to this conversation with you and to get to hang out in Boyle Heights, which I love coming here. I feel so re-energized and it just feels like home. So,
So let's let everyone else in.
yeah, why don't
We might have
just
to shut
come
just a
in?
bit. I'm sorry, but I'm just gonna, I didn't start on this, so what we're gonna do is the back row, you can just push back a little bit to the bookshelf. And then this row, push a little bit back, and then I'm gonna set some chairs in the front here. Si quieren mover atrás con las sillas. You can get up from the chair, I'm gonna put a row right here. Oh, that way they're standing. Oh. Sorry about that, I didn't know what to expect. If they're gonna stand you forward and you can stand on that. Trust me, we've done this a million times. Okay. Yeah, the other people with chairs, if you can make a row, si tienen sillas, se pueden poner acá, porque así la gente se puede parar ahí. ¿Sí? Y luego, ¿cerramos la puerta? Se va a poner muy caliente. No, mejor dejar abierta. All right.
Can you squeeze in?
We made it.
Yeah, you made it.
We're squeezed in. You can stand in front of the shelf. But I'm, yeah.
Bueno, pues, it's a good problem to have, right? Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming and supporting the event, supporting the bookstore. Yeah, so the question is about what inspired my work, and part of that is
Right about,
what's
yeah.
missing.
Yeah.
And when I started writing Across 100 Mountains, I had a really strong desire to read stories of child immigrants. And I couldn't really find books that talked about that. And so I started to write Across 100 Mountains, which centers the story of a young girl who leaves her home behind in order to come to the border in search of her father. And so I explore that experience of immigration through a child's perspective. And then, I did it again in The Distance Between Us, like really centering the children and talking about family separation and the impact of that separation on children and the lasting impact. Um, to me, that has always intrigued me in terms of when I think about what to write next. And I think about like, what book do I want to read that's not there, that it hasn't been talked about enough or written about enough. And that's why I wrote, for example, A Ballad of Love and Glory, which is a novel about the US invasion of Mexico in the 1840s. And it was that desire for me to fill in that hole of what's missing. And that part of history has been missing. We grew up not being taught about it. We don't, like children in schools, don't get the lessons in history class that they should be getting for them to fully understand the history of the United States and Mexico, and for them to understand that Mexicans have always been here, that we are not the outsiders, that we are not the invaders, that the invaders was the United States. So I wanted to fill in that hole of what was missing, and in that novel, that's kind of what I did. So that's me. That's kind of what inspires me to write my next book is, oh, what's missing? What haven't we learned? What haven't we been talking enough about, writing enough about?
Excellent. So I want to get into your latest novel. I want to get into latest work. Before we do that, though, I still want to look at your early work. And initially, you wrote a novel about immigration, focused on children, and after that, you wrote a memoir. So really, which was your own story. So I really want to ask you, what is the difference between writing something that is what somewhat like we'll say semi-autobiographical versus just straight up autobiographical? How did you what you started semi-autobiographical, then you went into memoir. So what prompted that change, and how are those two things different? And why did you start semi-autobiographical?
Yeah. Yeah, so when I was in school and I was majoring in creative writing, it was with a concentration on fiction. And that's all I ever read was fiction. So I wrote novels, I read short stories, and then I would write a lot of short stories. And when I started working on my novel, I wanted to write what we call today autofiction. I wanted to write that, but I was really struggling because the story wanted to go somewhere else. And I kept trying to bring it back and bring it back to how, like, I wanted to write about my own experience with immigration, but I wanted to keep going that way, and then I'll pull it back. So after fighting with the story for a few years, I just said, oh, forget it. Like, I'm just gonna go where it wants to go because it wants to go somewhere else. And what I ended up doing with Across 100 Mountains was I wrote not the life that I had lived, but the life I might have lived if my father hadn't come back for me. And what I realized was that what I was doing in that novel was exploring my deepest fear that I had as a child, which was that my father would forget about me and not come back for me, or that something might happen to him that would prevent him from coming back for me. And so in the novel, the father migrates and he doesn't return. And then I spend the whole story exploring what are the repercussions of that. How does the father's disappearance, the fact that he doesn't come back, how does that alter the life of this young girl? And so for me, like it was very cathartic. And I somebody once told me that it's an alternate memoir, because in the multiverse, that's the other life I'm living right now. And I said, wow, that is very true, you know? So after I wrote that novel, and then I wrote Dancing with Butterflies, which is set here in East LA in Boyle Heights, actually. I felt I was ready to switch and to write the memoir. And in terms of my craft, I felt a lot more confident because now that I had written two books and completed them, like gotten to the finish line, I felt that once I embarked on the memoir, that at least I knew how to finish a book. But I was still at a disadvantage in that I didn't have any training to write memoir. And I really didn't have much experience even reading memoir because I had only read novels before. So I didn't know what the guidelines were for writing memoir. And at the end of the day, I ended up using everything in my toolbox as a novelist to write that book. And I realized that actually it was a good thing that I was coming at it from a novelist background because I was safe, like I already knew how to write scenes, I knew how to write dialogue, I knew how to do like my plot. I knew about narrative structure, how to develop characters, like everything I had learned writing my novels was a strength. And so I said, okay, maybe my deficit is that I don't have experience with memoir, but my strength is that I know how to do all the other literary stuff. And so I really leaned into that. And that's what helped me complete that book. And I was really happy because I was able to use everything I had learned in my background as a fiction writer. The challenge was how not to start making up stuff, right? Because I'm writing memoir, I'm not writing a novel. And so I had to work within the parameters of what actually happened and the events that unfolded. So working within that, like it was something I had to learn how to do. But ultimately, I feel that I learned so much from that book, and it brought me closer to healing, having written a memoir. Because in my fiction, even though I was writing things that came from my own experience, there was still a character that wasn't me. And so there was a distance between me and what I was writing. Whereas with the memoir, there was no hiding from the truth. I had to confront it full on. I had to relive through all those moments. It was like walking through the fire, and then coming on the other side, reborn. And that's what that memoir allowed me to do.
Excellent. So you're writing these books in the double O's and in the 2010s. And this is a period of time where you have Sensenbrenner, you have SB 1070 in Arizona, you have the Tucson Book Ban. So you have all these attacks in the community that are pretty strong, that are pretty, the Minutemen are probably at their peak at that point in time. But now, this is the Trump era, right? So these politics, which were somewhat localized to like, let's say, the American Southwest, have gone completely national, in many ways have intensified. So I'm really interested in like how you feel that what you do as a memoirist, as a novelist, as somebody that essentially is, writing in a way that humanizes these communities that are so deeply demonized. What effect do you think that you're having, to combat, these demonizations? And what is it that people, in your position or in similar positions should be doing with their art at this point in time when our communities are so deeply under attack?
Yeah, well, I think every decade there's always all this terrible stuff happening. And I think that that's the role of the artist, like Toni Morrison says, that's when we get to work, right? When the darkness comes and then the artists have to get to work. Like we don't have time for self-pity. or to be, afraid, we have to get to work because we're the ones that help our civilizations heal. And her words really resonate with me because I have always seen our art and our writing as a way to heal. And I turned to writing as a way to heal. And then I realized that I'm not just healing myself, I'm also helping my community to heal. And so I do take my role as a writer very seriously when it comes to that. And all these things that happen in our society, I mean, they're always calling me. I hear the call that I have to do something. And sometimes it gets discouraging. Sometimes I do feel a little helpless. I feel a little powerless. And there's a voice in my head that says, well, you're just one person. You're not going to make a whole lot of change. And then I think of James Baldwin when he said, if we alter even by 1 millimeter the way people look at reality, we can change the world. So then I think about the 1 millimeter. And I said, okay, well, that's what I'm striving for is the 1 millimeter, right? But yeah, and sometimes I also get very angry when we talk about having to humanize human beings, right? Immigrants. And as much as sometimes like people tell me like, oh, your books put a human face to this, your books are humanizing immigrants. And it really hurts me because I feel like, why do they even have to be human? They are human. Like, we have to always acknowledge that and treat them with the dignity that they deserve. But unfortunately, politicians, they're always talking about immigrants in very demeaning ways. And so as artists, and you do this too, you're always like centering like immigration and the border and trying to bring shed some light on it and trying to keep it in the conversation because unfortunately we just cannot take a break from it. And we have to always stay on top of it because we have to continue to push back against that rhetoric that people like Trump are continuing to spew and to create this very toxic environment in our society. So we cannot rest. We have to always keep working and keep fighting.
Why do you really think that you are one of a handful of people who are really at the forefront of that fight? When you're right, it should be seen as humanization, but it is countering the demonization, fighting back against these vicious, horrible lies and distortions they tell about us. So I really do applaud you for that. And let's have another round of applause for Reyna Grande. One of the big heroes. So I'm interested also to talk to you about this question though. What is your current relationship, you feel, as a literary, in your literary life, in your actual life? What is your relationship with Mexico now? I mean, you were born there, but you're here now. You built a life here, and over the last, I'd say like last 5-10 years, for me particularly, the last 2 years, working with the Mexican Cultural Institute, I've come into all kinds of contact. People who were born in Mexico, but like have built a life here, and it's created such a weird parallel experience to like what the Chicano experiences, which is like this feeling of wanting to connect to like to be connected to Mexico, but also disconnected from Mexico, and to draw our cultural heritage, draw our culture from it, but also feeling a rupture from it. And I thought that was unique to us, but I find so many people expressing this exact same thing. But I'm very curious. How do you feel about that? You're on mic.
Oh man, that's a complicated one. When you said what's your relationship with, I thought you were gonna ask me to talk about my husband. Cause he's so sweet. Yeah, no, but with Mexico, oh man, that gets really complicated. There's so much turmoil there. And well, when I'm over here, I'm like, soy bien mexicana, you know? And then I go over there and I'm like, oh my God, I'm such a gringa. Who am I kidding? Who am I kidding? Like, so it's when I'm in Mexico that I'm confronted with how assimilated I am.
Yeah.
Whereas over here, I'm always in denial. Y mirando con mis flores. Ay, yo bien mexicanota. Y luego voy allá, you're like, soy bien gringa. Yeah, so I've just come to accept it. You know, before I used to have a lot of turmoil about like, oh, where do I belong? Que, you know, soy como la India María, ni de aquí ni de allá. And I say, no, soy de aquí y soy de allá. You know, there's no more, no more of that. Like, no, I'm gonna own both countries, both identities, both languages. Yeah, no, they're mine. So there's a quote in one of my favorite books, The Sympathizer by Viet Thanh Nguyen, which is now a TV series. You guys should watch it. And there's a quote that I love in his book where he says, "You're not half of anything, but twice of everything." And that's who we are. That's who we are as a community.
Not happening, twice as nice. All right, so yeah, no, that's very fast. So I want to shift the conversation now, talk a little bit about, you know, recently I had a great opportunity to go speak at, Harvard Alumni Latino Association at PCC. And, but no, it wasn't by me. Everywhere I saw was like, Reyna Grande went here, Reyna Grande went here, Reyna Grande went here, Reyna Grande went here. And so like, you were they're very proud of the time that you spent there, Pasadena Community College. But Pasadena City
Did you
College.
see the bus?
Yeah, you're on a bus, yeah. How excited you are. You know, that reminds me, I remember one time I was at the Denver airport and I saw Reyna Grande's, I saw Reina's books right there. I took a picture and I said, like, you're in Denver, you know, and what's great about you is that you are on buses and you are in airports and you still get very excited about it. So I really admire that because, you know, you put me on a bus and I wouldn't be here right now. I'd be. I'm kidding. No. Be on a jet somewhere. No, but no, but you're very, I mean, the excitement you have for all these things is remarkable. But the question I want to ask is about the role that the community college has played in your life and that it played in so many of our lives because you know you are you know a best-selling author. You are someone whose work is widely read and widely publicized. And you get reviews in the biggest you know all the news fit to print, right? But at the same time, you do not shy away or hide the fact that you attended a community college and that it played a huge role in your life. And I think that that's really admirable, but also want to talk about what role did BCC play in your writing career?
No, I love community college. It's one of the best things that ever happened to me. And I wasn't supposed to end up at a community college because when I was in high school, I got accepted to UC Irvine, but then my father didn't let me go. And I spent like, you know, half a year feeling sorry for myself. And then I made the decision that I wasn't gonna let my dad like keep me from pursuing my higher education. And so I took a bus to PCC and I enrolled myself at PCC. And then I realized this is where I was meant to be, you know, because I don't know if I would be a writer today if it hadn't been for PCC and the time that I spent there. And that is where I met my mentor, you know, Diana Savas, my English professor, who took me under her wing. And she was the one who put the idea in my head that I could be a professional writer, and she guided me finding the right writing program for me. She helped me to transfer to a four-year university. She helped me find scholarships to help pay for my education. So everything, I mean, all of those 2 years I spent at PCC were so crucial in my development as a young woman, but also as a young writer. And so one of the best things that I love about, you know, the campaign that PCC has been doing to advertise community college, they have been featuring alumni, and that's how I ended up in banners all around the campus. And then they put me on the city buses. Like they pasted my picture on city buses. And but what I love about it is that the caption that they put on my photo, it says, before she was a best-selling author, a PCC professor nurtured her talent. And that was so beautiful because it's like, yes, we have to recognize, right? The professors, our teachers who nurture our talents, our teachers who see our potential even before we see it in ourselves. Like the teachers really change lives. And so it's important for us to always celebrate those teachers and acknowledge the difference that they're making in their students' lives. And also I love like promoting community colleges because I feel sometimes they get a bad reputation that they don't deserve, because community colleges are there to serve the community, and people of all ages can go there and learn skills, learn English, learn a trade, prepare, for higher education, to transfer to universities, all of that. And I feel that the community colleges are constantly trying to really do, to be in service to the community. And I think that we need to support them. And also they help so many students to be able to afford their education and to come out with a degree without like so much debt, because education, as we know, has become like really expensive and very like it's just to have access to that kind of money. I mean, it can really put you in debt for a very, very long time. Whereas, when I went to community college, I was able to then afford to get an education without the crippling debt that many other students have because they go straight to university. So I feel that we need to continue to support our community colleges.
If you could you go a bit more into depth about the mentorship that was provided to you by this professor? Like, what specifically, in what specific way she encouraged you, and how did that encouragement affect the trajectory of your writing?
Well, let me just put it this way. She took me to live with her, which is like, sometimes I tell teachers, you don't have to take your students to live with you. To change their lives, you don't have to take them home with you. But my teacher took me home.
Yeah.
And it's because when I was at PCC, I was having a really tough time at home. My father was not his best self. He was very violent. He was, an alcoholic. And at that time when I was at PCC, things had just gotten out of control. And one day he beat up my stepmother. She ended up in the hospital. And then the cops showed up and they arrested my father right in front of me, and they took him away in handcuffs. And then the next day I still had to go to class, and I still had to turn in my homework and pay attention in class. But my father was in jail and my stepmother was in the hospital. And I felt that my life was falling apart. So I went to talk to my professor, to Diana, during her office hours. And I just wanted someone to talk to, someone to talk to listen. And when I told her what was going on at home, she said, Reynita, do you want to come live with me? And I said, I almost said no, porque no quiero molestar, no quiero ser una carga para otra gente. But then I stopped myself from saying no, and I said, yes, I'll come live with you. And so I went home and I put my clothes in a trash bag because I didn't even have a suitcase. So I put in a trash bag, and then I moved in with my English teacher. And she lived right across from PCC. So I would just walk across the street to school every day. And then after school, we would hang out in her living room and she would grade papers and I would do my homework. And then one time she had a spare bedroom that was full of books. It was like her little library, and I had never seen anybody have a spare bedroom, let alone for books. And she went in there and she came out with the book and she handed it to me, and it was The House on Mango Street. And I had never heard of Sandra Cisneros. And she said, here, you have to read this book. And that day when I read that book, it was like, wow, like now I can see myself in a book. And then when I was there living with her, that's when she convinced me, like that I was a good writer and that I could be a professional writer. And she would say, if Sandra Cisneros can do it, you can do it. If Isabel Allende can do it, you can do it. She was like my little Cesar Chavez, and Dolores Huerta, sí se puede, sí se puede, sí se puede. I was like, wow, like, yeah. So when I moved out of her house, like, I knew that I could do it because she had really built up my confidence in myself. So that was a life-changing moment for me.
And what was your experience like at Santa Cruz?
In Santa Cruz, I felt it was really hard because as bad as my home was here in LA, it was still home. And so going away to college, 6 hours away, I was very homesick when I first got there. And also, I was having a lot of culture shock because at PCC, I was used to not being a minority. I was used to like a very diverse campus. There were a lot of Latinos, there were a lot of Asians, a lot of students of color. And so I was always very comfortable at PCC. And then when I went to Santa Cruz at that time, it wasn't a Hispanic serving institution like it is now. Only about 15% of the student body was Latino. And now it's like over 35%. And also I was majoring in creative writing, and there were not a lot of Latinos in that program. So usually I was like either the only Latina or maybe one of two Latino students in the program. So I was suffering from major culture shock. And that was the first time I met a vegan and a vegetarian. That was the first time I heard the word compost. And I was like, what the heck is that? So yeah, like, and then like eating green tortillas because they put like spinach in the dough, and like, why, when did tortillas become green? So it was just like major culture shock. But I struggled at the beginning, but I was glad that I was a transfer student because I felt that at PCC, I had learned how to be a college student, and I had acquired a lot of like skills and knowledge. I had learned how to like hold myself accountable for my own progress and how to advocate for myself, how to ask for help. That was a lesson I learned when I went to Diana's office and I knocked on her office door, is that if I ask for help, somebody will help me, that I don't have to do it alone. And so I applied those same things when I was at UCSC. And I acquired another mentor when I was there because I went knocking on the office doors of my teachers. So it was a beautiful experience that, but ultimately what I really loved was that it taught me how to be more independent and how to be away on my own somewhere else. So, and how to get out of my comfort zone and how to be uncomfortable and learn how to thrive even when the situation might not be ideal. So that's what I learned at UCSC.
So speaking on the college circuit, going on, speaking at universities, I remember, years ago, you had posted something on social media. And I've experienced the same thing, of people not believing that I was the speaker. I'm thinking I was there like cleaning the room or something like this. I almost got shot one time trying to get my, like the guy over at, Southwest College. Yeah, that was wild, that's a whole other story, but this experience of like not, people not, it's happened like 2 or 3 times. Of people not believing that, that you are the keynote speaker or you are there to speak. I know you experienced as well, can you tell us a little bit about like, what that's like to actually like be invited by university, you think it's gonna be great, and all of a sudden. People there don't actually think you're there to speak, they think you're there to clean, or you're there to set up some, catering or something.
Okay, well, I haven't had, you know, experiences like yours. What those are, that's really scary. But I mean, okay, I did have one really scary moment. I was giving a presentation at a high school. I was up on the stage giving a presentation to high schoolers. And all of a sudden, the school police runs into the auditorium and says, everybody down, everybody down. We have a school shooter on the premises. And I literally jumped off the stage and got under the seats with all the students. And we were on the floor like this, under the seat. And I was feeling so bad because I wasn't with my family, and a lot of times I have a lot of guilt when I'm traveling because my mother guilt tells you there's a voice in your head that says, "What are you doing here? You should be home with your children." And so I was on the floor with the school shooter at the school, and I'm thinking I'm gonna die here, and I'm such a bad mom because I should have been home with my kids. Like that's what I was feeling. So we were there for, I don't know, maybe 20 some minutes, and like I could hear people running outside in the hall and with the walkie-talkie. And then the school police comes back and says, everybody up, this was just a drill. Can you believe that? How it traumatized all the students that were in there with me in the auditorium? And then like me and the teachers that were in there, it was so traumatizing. It's like, how dare you do a drill like this, you know? And anyway, so that's one of the things that happened to me that was scary. But in regards to being mistaken for, the janitor or things like that, I had that experience when I was in Washington, DC. I was at a author gala at the Library of Congress, which is a really fancy library. And so it was, this very fancy author party. I went, I put on my name tag, and then I'm looking around for the other Latino authors, and I couldn't see them. And the Latinos I saw was the servers, right? And everybody else, mostly white authors at this event. So I was kind of scared, and then imposter syndrome kicks in, and I'm like, what am I doing here? I don't belong here. I shouldn't be here. But I made myself stay and try to like go mingle with the authors. And then this white author stopped me and said, "Oh, excuse me, where are the restrooms?" And then like I'm like, I don't know. And then he saw my name tag.
Yeah.
And he said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I thought," and he didn't finish the sentence, but I knew what he was gonna say. He thought I was one of the servers. So yeah, so those are moments that a lot of us Latinos, I've talked to a lot of Latinos who said, I went to an event and somebody thought I was a janitor or somebody thought I was this. And it's like, yeah, I mean, but I think that's why it's so important that we continue to do what we're doing.
Yeah.
Because we have to take up that space, we have to take a seat at the table. We have to normalize our presence so that people get used to seeing us there and know that, yeah, we belong there, we belong there, and we gotta show up and be there.
I mean, a similar experience. I was at Washington University, and I'm sitting there in St. Louis, and I'm sitting there at the breakfast table. Like I'm sitting there eating my breakfast, and this white guy comes up to me, and he starts asking me about like the breakfast specials and like the hotel, whatever. And I was just like, but I had the conscious mind because this happens so often. So I started asking him questions about the hotel. Like about like the laundry service, whether there was a gym, so we were just gonna ask each other questions that neither of us know the answer to, it's just. So flipped it on him, but it's just ridiculous. I mean, it's outrageous. I'm sitting at the table. I'm literally I'm eating the same omelet as you. Like, why do you think I work here? That's wild. But so a quick smooth transition into your latest book, A Ballad of Love and Glory. Very, very different. You actually did a lot of historical research for this book. Can you tell us about what it's like, what the experience is for people who might not know? What is it like to write historical fiction? What is it, what is that process like for you? Like do you do research first? Do you know where the story's going? I mean, how do you have that delicate dance between research and writing?
Yeah, well, I was really scared going into that book. And I actually tried not to write the book very, very hard. I kept putting it off and putting it off, putting it away. And that's why it took me like 7 years to finally finish it. And it was actually the pandemic that helped me finish that book. Otherwise, it might still not be done because it was so challenging. I really didn't have much training researching. And with my other books, I never really had to do that level of research. And when I wrote Dancing with Butterflies, which is a novel that takes place here in East LA in Boyle Heights, it's about folklorico dancers. And the research was to go to folklorico shows and to talk to dancers and to talk to the directors and to talk to the costume makers. I mean, that was fun, and I was like, oh, this is research. It's so much fun. But then when I wrote Ballad, oh my God, I read like 100 books, history, like the history of Mexico, the US, the 19th century, the Texas Rebellion. I read biographies of Santana. I read a bunch of like books about the St. Patrick's Battalion. I mean, it was like on and on and on. But for me, what kept pulling me back to the story was this very strong desire to write about the St. Patrick's Battalion. Like, I just feel that we're forgetting about them, more as the years go by, fewer and fewer people know about the St. Patrick's Battalion. Even in Mexico, they're starting to not teach about the San Patricios. And I really felt that I don't want their memory to be forgotten, So Ballad was a love letter to the San Patricios. So I really wanted to write that story. It was difficult because I was very aware that I'm writing about a historical time period and I wanted to teach my reader about the history, but I didn't want to write a history book. It's a novel. So a history book tells you what happened, but a novel shows you how it felt. And so I always reminded myself, like, first and foremost, this is a novel. This is a story that, the reader is gonna like learn a lot from it. But ultimately, like, I really want them to be engaged with the characters and with the plot and with the story that I'm writing. Um, the challenge for me was how to fit my love story within the historical timeline because I didn't want to manipulate the historical events. I didn't want to distort them. I didn't want to like switch them around or move them around just so that they fit my plot line. I wanted my plot line to fit into the historical events. So that was a challenge. But I really, really loved writing the book. Um, I want to keep writing more about our history. So I really hope that I can continue to work in this genre because I am so in love with it. And also, I have really struggled to move on from my characters because I fall in love with them so much. I am struggling to cut the emotional bond that I have with them and to start with a fresh cast of characters. I've been struggling with that, but I think I'm getting ready to start a new novel.
So again, you talk about this history being lost. I don't want to presuppose everyone knows the history of the San Patricio. So why don't you share with us?
Okay, well, how many of you guys have heard of Los San Patricios? Raise your hand. Yeah. A few people, yeah. So Los San Patricios, they were a regiment, a battalion in the Mexican army composed of deserters from the US Army. And most of them were Irish. That's why they're called Los San Patricios. In the US Army in the 1840s, when the United States decided to invade Mexico, half of the US Army was foreign born, and 25% of them were Irish. And this was during in the 1840s. You remember Ireland was suffering from a famine, the Great Famine. Over 1 million people died in the famine, and then another million were displaced from their home, and that's the Irish, diaspora of the 1900s. And so John Riley was this real person. He left his home in Ireland and he immigrated and he ended up in the US Army as a private. And he saw that the Irish were discriminated against in the US Army, just like in the rest of the US. The Irish were the most unwanted immigrant groups, and people saw them as drunks and illiterate and poor, and they didn't want them here, and they were severely discriminated, and also because they were Catholics, so they experienced a lot of religious prejudice. And in the US Army, nativist officers would mistreat the Irish and the Germans and the Italians, and all the Catholics were severely mistreated in the US Army. And so they started deserting. They would throw themselves into the Rio Grande, swim south, and then join the Mexican army. And so one day, April 12, 1846, John Riley threw himself in the Rio Grande, swam across, and he joined the Mexican army. And he pretty soon, with Santa Anna, remember Santa Anna, Presidente Santa Anna, he created El Batallón de San Patricios. And he would recruit more and more Irishmen from the US Army to switch over. So he was actively recruiting, and the San Patricios fought in pretty much all the battles that took place between the US and Mexico. And in the second to the last battle in Churubusco in Mexico City, they were captured by the US Army, and 50 of them were hanged at the gallows. And then the others were branded on the cheek with the letter D for this deserter. And then they were thrown in prison. And people don't really know what happened to the San Patricios after the war was over. So some of them stayed in Mexico and they married and, made new families. Others went back to Ireland. And so if you go to Mexico City in San Angel, Plaza San Jacinto, there is a bust of John Riley, and then there's a plaque on the wall listing all the names of the San Patricios. And it's a beautiful, gesture of Mexico, and it says this is a memory of los héroes irlandeses who gave up their lives for la patria mexicana, So it's such a beautiful story, and there's been collaborations between Mexico and Ireland to continue to keep the memory alive. When I was writing the book, I went to Ireland, to John Riley's hometown in Clifton in County Galway, and there's a little statue there in the memory of the San Patricios. So I want to continue, I wanted to write a love letter to this man because I was so intrigued by the fact that they were willing to give up their lives for Mexico. And so that's part of the reason why I wrote the novel. And I just love how we've been able to continue talking about them. Even right now, we're talking about them, remembering them.
No, that's definitely wonderful. It's always striking to me how much of how much of history just like we just walk right by and we don't even think about it, you know? Like, so much of like activism in Los Angeles, we always meet in Pershing Square. But no one even second thought to who Pershing was. And this guy, an Indian killer, he was many war crimes in the Philippines, and he also was part of the Mexican expedition hunting down Pancho Villa, and they never got anywhere close to Pancho Villa. Just murdered all kinds of people in the Pueblitos, and like that's the legacy of John Pershing, and that's where Occupy LA started. That's where we meet for May Day. That's where what I mean, and we just walk right by it, you know.
Yeah.
And when I was in Mexico City, I remember most recent can't remember the name of the ruin the ancient the temple right there by Unam. You know what I'm talking about? It's a little small. It's right there. But you have a view of the city. So from there, from these ancient steps that are older than Teotihuacan, but it's not as well preserved. But you see the distance, and in the distance there's a Six Flags. And I was trying to explain to all the Mexican students that like Six Flags represents like Texas and like even the flag of Texas over there. That's the Mexican American War, and they're like, oh, they're like, oh my God. But I don't think most people in America actually know Six Flags. What that really means is Six Flags over Texas. So that includes the Confederate flag. So it's just, just all kinds of outrageous abuses everywhere. So this other novel you wrote, this other book that is recently coming out, Somewhere We're Human. Can you tell us about this? It's actually a collaborative effort. Can you tell us about what went into that?
Yeah, this is the first anthology that I edit. And I've had the honor of working with Sonia Guiñanzaca, who is a poet from Ecuador. And she and I were both undocumented, but Sonia grew up in New York and I grew up here in LA. But we came together to edit this anthology. We put out a call for submissions and we got 150 submissions and we could only pick 25. And then we kept adding more and more and asking our editor, like, oh, can we put more? Can we add on more? So we ended up with 41. We actually had 42 pieces, but we lost one right before we went to publication. So 41 stories of undocumented Americans who shared the story of migration. And we were very, very deliberate about who we picked because we wanted it to be representative of the undocumented community. And so we have like over 20 countries represented. Even with our Latino contributors, like, we have some from Mexico, El Salvador, from Honduras, from Dominican Republic, from Argentina and Peru. And, like we really wanted to have a diverse range of voices. And then we included like other undocumented voices from like Vietnam and Korea and Bangladesh and Brazil, like, different voices. So I was very proud of this work and it's a really beautiful anthology. And I hope that I can continue to to give opportunities because a lot of these, the voices in this book, this is the first time being published. And for me, like that was one of the things that really drove me to collaborate with this project was, how can I use my platform? How can I use, the opportunities that I have been given as a writer? Like, how can I make sure that I'm paying it forward and opening doors for other writers to tell their stories? So I was very happy to be able to publish like first-time writers that they got to see their work in print. And I thought it was really beautiful.
So, I just had some more questions. We, as a community, we are, we are the country's fastest growing demographic, in terms of population. But we're also the least represented in film, in television, academia, and in literature. And so, I'm very interested in to see as you are one of the few people that made it to the other side of that, but like, what do you think that not just like you can, but like what can we all do from our various positions and people that are, that want to change this? What can we do to really make an impact and get more of our stories and get more of our names in print, get more of our words and our work in print into bigger and broader audiences? What is the way forward? In your opinion?
Yeah, that's a hard one. No, because I mean, it's true, like we're so underrepresented in everything, you know. We're like less than 6% of lawyers. We're, 7% of physicians and doctors, and we're like 4.4% of actors in leading roles. Like that, like the percentages are just so small, and we need to change those numbers. We absolutely need to change the numbers. So to me, continuing to do what we're all doing, I think all of us are always striving to improve things for the community, and we're working together, collaborating. It's like, what else can we do? And definitely like continuing to support artists, support writers. If you hear of a Latino film coming out, you gotta go see it, because that's how we send the message that we care, that we want more. And so always making sure that we are doing what we can to send that message to those institutions, the powers that be, that we are supporting, that we want more of this content, and that and we want to see ourselves, in stories, in literature, in the film, in our televisions. We want to see ourselves. So let's continue to do that work.
And my final question, you're such an inspiring figure to so many, and I've seen it firsthand. People get so excited. Remember when we were gonna have you on the radio and a few other things. We were so excited to hear that you were gonna be on the radio. We're so excited. Everyone's like, you're such just you inspire so much. I really want to know, what inspirational words do you have for people who are just getting started on their writing journey, who are just getting started to take their writing very seriously? What should they, what advice do you have to encourage them, or to really like what they should look out for, or just different things?
Mhm. Okay, what helped me early on in my career was understanding that there's two parts to being a writer. There's the creative part, because we are artists and we create works of art. And then there's the business side. And where most writers struggle with is that side, because we're artists, so all we want is we just want to write. But unfortunately, when your book is published and then it costs $18, now it's a product. And the publishing is a business. And so you have to learn how to think like a business person. You have to become a salesperson. You have to learn how to move the product. And that understanding that and accepting it was what has made the difference in my career. Because I have been doing this for 18 years now, and I am like doing well enough that my writing pays my bills. Like I don't need to have a day job, because I learned from the very beginning, when my first book was about to come out, I knew that, okay, it's time to put the writer part of me away And now I'm thinking business here. What do I need to do to make sure that my numbers are good, that the books are selling, that I'm doing everything I need to do? And after talking to a lot of writers, I have seen that that's the part they struggle with, because they're like, well, I'm an artist, I don't want to be like selling my book. I don't want to be doing that. I want to write. And I said, well, you're not going to write for long if you're not selling. So learn how to balance the two, and I think that's what has helped me to understanding that I need to find a balance between the creative part and the business part. And also, I am not above, like selling my own books. Like, I mean, you guys saw me show up with my little suitcase. Even to this day, I mean, this book was number 12 on Amazon a week ago, and I'm still traveling with my suitcase full of books, right? And I have sold books out of the trunk of my car like if they were tamales. Like, ¿cuál quieren? El rojo, el verde, ¿cuál quieren? Like even to this day, I still do it because I know how important it is that the numbers, it's all about the numbers. And when I want to write another book, the first thing my editor is going to do is look up my numbers. And that will determine whether or not they buy my next book. That will determine how much money they give me for my next book. And not only that, but also when the book comes out, the first thing bookstores do in deciding whether or not they're going to carry your book on their shelves is they're going to look up the numbers. And so those sales are really, really important. And as much as I would like to just, be creating and making art, I also understand that I won't be able to do that for long if I do not embrace the other side and learn how to sell my books and keep them selling so that I can keep writing.
So you have been a wonderful audience, an amazing audience, a very orderly audience. I think half of you were here before 15 minutes early. It's very, very rare. So I do want to turn it over to any questions. Probably about five, maybe. And I'm trusting you with five questions because you have been such a well-behaved audience. So I think you can handle it. We'll just have to cut down to two because people don't know how to act. All right, so in the back.
Hi, very pleased to meet you. Just had one question. So when you're writing, actually, you write a book, do you have like multiple projects going on at the same time? Like you said, your last book, you decided for 7 years and you came back to it. Are you working on other projects at the same time and like put it away because this one's giving me trouble and then come back? Or you only focus on one project and then once that's complete, you work on the next?
Yeah. Yeah, I try to work with multiple projects. I mean, not a lot, two, maybe three at the most, but I like switching. Like, for example, when I was writing ballad, I put it away to do this book, the adaptation of The Distance Between Us for young readers. So I had that book come out while I was still working on ballad. And then I worked on ballad for another year or so, and then I put it away again. And then I worked on A Dream Called Home. And then that came out, and then I continued working on ballad. So I was juggling those multiple projects. And one of the things I really enjoy doing is being able to switch between fiction and memoir. And I like it for my own like sanity, because when I work on memoir, it is so emotionally like overwhelming. And switching to fiction gives me a rest. And I'm able to like continue to write, but it's no longer me. I'm not the protagonist of the story, it's someone else. And it just gives me a chance to recover from the emotional turmoil that memoir brings out. And then when I feel like, okay, I'm ready to go back to memoir, then I switch again. and I do memoir for a bit, and then I switch back. So that has been really helpful. But yeah.
Alright, turn it up. In the middle?
Right, it's an honor to meet you. My question is, when you speak about finding the balance between being like a business person and being a writer, can you talk a little bit more about that process in the sense of, do you find that there's like a lot of censorship within your writing, or like the avoiding of like certain things or setting boundaries within your own writing that, you know, like don't mesh well between those two personas per se?
Mhm. I mean, they definitely require two parts, two sides of your brain, you know, there's a creative side. And then there's the business side has to be more logical. Whereas the creative side, it's more like you enter a dream, you know, it's this dreamlike state where you're creating, you're tapping into that, you're in the zone, you know? And then when it's time to like switch, then it's more like more the analytical part. And so I've had to train myself to make that transition. And it's hard, but I also take advantage of, because there's times, because the creativity cannot keep flowing all the time. You know, there's times when it's a dry period, when the writing's not coming, I'm kind of struggling with like the story. And that's when I say, oh, I think that maybe I need a break, and you know, like I'll focus instead of like on the business part, which is like, how can I promote my work? And I'll be emailing teachers or emailing conferences or trying to find out like what are some upcoming conferences that I could reach out to the organizers and say, oh, you know, I would love to be part of this or that. And so that's when I start working on my events. Right now I'm working on my fall events, like trying to book some events for the fall. And even for next spring, like I'm already planning, for example, AWP is gonna happen next March, and I'm already planning like what are some panels that I could propose to AWP. So that's to me like that's really important, finding that balance. And then when I'm done, like I feel like okay, I think I'm ready to return to the writing. I'll switch back. Mhm.
This is an announcement. Got very personal with your familia.
Mhm.
How do you deal with, I don't know if they read it, but how do you deal with the reaction or any kind of pull to not reveal things like that?
Yeah. Well, the ones who truly love me kept talking to me, and the ones who don't love me enough, I don't care. Yeah.
Are there any other questions? Okay, even then.
Thank you for talking to us and taking time. I read The Distance Between Us and when I was in college, and I really loved it. I'm not a big reader. I'm sorry to say that everybody that's not here, people that, but your book's one of the books that out of the, not so many books that I read, it's like I couldn't put down. I really liked it a lot. But I heard you say the word, that it helped me heal, during this talk tonight. And I was kind of surprised because I thought, oh, I think she's already healed. Like you did all the healing you had to do. So my question to you is, when on a personal level, do you do prayer? You pray? Did you learn to pray? Did anybody teach you the praying and like the Virgencita and all that? Is that part of your? I'm curious.
Oh, wow. Your question surprised me. I wasn't expecting it. You did like a total U-turn. So you're like, "Ooh." Yeah, did I learn to pray? Well, I was raised Catholic. My abuelita, she was very, very Catholic, and she would take us to church all the time. We would go to peregrinaciones. go to town praying at all the churches. And those are some really beautiful memories that I have of my grandma and how much faith she had and how she taught us to pray for comfort and all of that. But I lost it because when I came to live with my father in LA, my father was not religious. And when we would ask him to take us to church, like imagine it was us children asking to be taken to church. My father would raise his Budweiser and say, "This is my God." And so little by little, we lost our religion because we were no longer going to church. And so I haven't gone back. Like I'm not a practicing Catholic, and I did not raise my children with religion. In fact, one time my son said, "Is Jesus the son of Zeus?" That's how bad of a job I did raising my kids Catholic. But you know what's interesting? When I write, the Catholic in me comes out. And so, like, if you read ballad, Jimena is so religious. And she's so religious. And it's like, oh my God, where does this come from? I'm not religious anymore. But then I realized, well, it's my abuelita's teachings have not been lost. It still comes back. And in my writing, that's when I tap into what I knew as a child and in regards to faith. So it's still there. It's still there. But, yeah. Mhm.
And final question.
Like everyone, thanks for coming. I know it means a lot to me because Boyle Heights is my home. So I feel connected to you in that way. But my question was, I guess, a little bit more personal. And if you don't want to open up about that, that's okay. But I read both your memoirs, and I was just really intrigued with your relationship with your family, in particular your parents. And so my question is, how did you learn to love them and continue to love them? I feel that that's how you felt even to the end, especially with your dad. Past all the pain,
Yeah.
because, and not just that, but like also your siblings too, I feel there was a lot of like disconnect at some points and then you guys would come back together.
Mhm.
But I guess, how did you learn
Yeah.
to love past all the hurt, past all the anger? And how do you continue to do that now? And how do you not, I guess, let that affect you and then continue to show them love
Yeah.
even today?
Right.
I'm assuming.
Yeah, no, thank you. It's very complicated, It's really complicated. I think writing the books really helped me. As I mentioned before, like writing has been a form of therapy for me. But when I was writing The Distance Between Us, I realized that as a writer, writing about my parents, I was able to have more compassion for them than as their daughter. And it's because when they became characters in my book, I had to treat them with the dignity that I always treat my characters. And I was forced to like see them not as my parents, but as my characters. And when I write characters, I'm always trying to learn who they are and why they are the way they are and the society in which they grew up and why they make the choices that they make. And so I did that with my parents and it was eye-opening because for the first time I felt that I understood them and I was not looking at them through the lens of the little girl they left behind, but I was looking at them through the eyes of a writer, trying to understand these characters. And I learned so much, I learned to see their humanity. I learned to understand, my parents are human beings and they have a lot of flaws. And so that was my path towards healing from that and understanding them. Also, I felt that as a parent myself, I learned how how difficult parenting is. And when you have a lot of unresolved trauma, it's going to come back. It's gonna manifest itself in the way you raise your children, the way you interact with your children. And so I have worked really, really hard to try to break some of those cycles, but it has been very, very hard. So I have more compassion now for my parents than when I was younger. So that has helped. I also try to model for my kids because I was just talking to my sister about this a few days ago, my sister Mago, because when we had Thanksgiving, Mago hosted Thanksgiving. And I rented an Airbnb and I told her I was gonna go get my mom so that she could hang out with us during that time. And it was 4 days of hanging out. And Mago later told me, don't do that to me again. She said, I don't mind if you bring her for a day, but 4 days is too much. And so we were talking about it a few days ago because she was still kind of feeling that resentment, right? And she said, why do you do that? Why do you always want to have a relationship with her? Even though like she's hurt us so much. And then I say, I want to model for our children how I want them to treat us when we're older. I said, and I never want to experience my children or our children not inviting us to a family get together because they're angry at us. And I said, so that's what we need to do. We need to model for our kids compassion towards our parents, that we can be a better person by including them, even though, yes, I know there's a lot of hurt there, but, if our children see how we are trying to do better and have compassion towards our mother, I'm really hoping that years from now, that they're able to also forgive us for our mistakes and invite us to Thanksgiving. So that's where I'm coming from. And so that has helped me a lot to be able to have a better relationship with my parents, but even more so with my children. Because if I'm healed, then that means I could be a better mother to them.
So this has been Notes from the Chicano Underground. Thank you so much for coming. I encourage you to come get a book from Reyna. Get a signed copy. Check out the store afterwards. Ask Viva Padilla about the store. My name is Matt Cedillo. I'm the literary director of the Mexican Cultural Institute in Los Angeles. Ask me anything. We've been joined by the great Josefina Lopez is here. Ask her about Casa Ceruna, Playhouse. And yeah, it's been a great night. Thanks so much.
You also.
Oh, thank you. I'm at. Yeah.